So we'll go through a little bit of what we did yesterday, and then we'll finish up this lecture today. So this is the night before Jesus is to be crucified. He's meeting with his disciples in an upper room, in the upper room, and they are celebrating the Passover, and then we've seen what happened during that time. So now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world, the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. We talked about the Passover, that it was celebrating the release from captivity in Egypt, and how God protected them not only in leaving Egypt, but in getting to the promised land. We talked about the lambs that were slain, and then that lamb became part of the Seder feast. We call it Seder. Pesach is what the Jews call it. And so let's read this passage. Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During supper, when the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God. So we talked about his knowledge, that he knew that his hour had come, he knew who his betrayer was, he knows his own identity. Well, welcome back. And now you're leaving. Yeah. Okay. Well, you can watch this video and go to Facts and see everything that you've missed. Okay. Thank you. Have a nice weekend. Catch up.
Yeah.
Have fun. Stay nice. Then we talked about a number of things, but let's talk about Christ's humility. It says Jesus rose from supper, laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, to wipe them with the towel that he wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, do you wash my feet?" Jesus answered him, "What I am doing you do not understand, but afterward you will understand." Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered him, "If I do not wash you, you have no share with me. You have no dealings with me. You have no relationship with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "The one who is bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you." For he knew who was to betray him. That was why he said, "Not all of you are clean." I talked to you yesterday about this incident and how shocking it would have been to the people there, to the disciples. And I told you that it was a custom that when you entered a person's house, a slave would wash that person's feet, the guest's feet, when they entered. And in some places, it had to be a Gentile slave. So this was too demeaning even for a Jewish slave. And Jesus is washing his disciples. And I also told you that this is the only place in all of ancient history, not just in Christian writings, in all writings, all ancient writings, where we see a superior washing the feet of an inferior. It was literally unheard of. And I think that has a lot to do with Peter's indignance. He's talking back to his master, right? But he's shocked. And I think that's like, you don't hear anyone say anything, right? Jesus just gets up, puts a towel around his waist, takes a basin of water, and starts washing feet. And nobody says anything. And until Peter says, "You're going to wash my feet?" And I think it's because they were shocked. I don't think it was because he was too proud for Jesus to do that. I think it's because he thought And so this would have been stunning. This would have been unbelievable. But how does this show the humility of Jesus? This act. I'm asking for reals. What? Oh, heard the back half. Oh, how does this episode show Christ's humility? Okay.
Lord of the universe, and he's stooping on his knees, washing people's feet. In that culture, that would have been something not even slaves could do.
The Jewish slaves.
The Jewish slaves,
Yeah, and not just feet, man feet. I'm sorry, guys, but it's true. And not just man feet, but man feet that wear sandals
In the desert.
in the desert where it's dusty and grimy, and when it rains, it's muddy. And yeah, and he was washing. That would take a good deal of humility. And Philippians 2, this is such a beautiful passage. I'm going to read it to you, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about it so you can understand it a little bit better. But this is a passage explaining who Jesus is and what he did with it. So here's what it says. Philippians 2. Let each of you look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, Christ, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Here's what he's saying is, you need to be like Jesus. Who?
Also, Jared.
Like
Why?
permanently?
Still on the day trip.
What? Huh? I need Mr. Hood to tell me.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Mr. Language.
That needs to be okay with Mr.
Oh my gosh, she's singing the whole way. We went Mr.
Um, I'm just going to go on. So what this is saying is, this is calling us to the same humility of Christ, who being in very nature God, did not consider, now I'm doing the NIV, did not consider equality with God something to be taken advantage of. He could have smote everyone. He could have just said, out with you, and slay everyone. He had the power to do that, but he didn't use his power for his own advantage. And when it says there that he didn't count equality with God something to be grasped, that word grasped is in the Hebrew word is something that means assault and even sexual assault. He didn't take advantage of people, is what it's saying. And we are not anything that Jesus was. But Paul is calling us to have the kind of humility that Jesus had. And it took that kind of humility. What?
That's because he's normal.
Now you can go.
You gotta not.
Was I right not to just let a student take a student out of class? Yeah, Seamus
Yes,
came.
I know.
I'm
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Have fun. We'll miss you. So we are to have that same kind of humility of Christ. Hey, grab this before you go. And your homework is chapter 29 student work. There you go. And then we talk about Christ's heart in all of this. Obviously, Jesus knew the deceit of Judas. He knew from the beginning who would betray him, and he still loved Judas. He could have been angry. He could have stood up and said, "Get out of here! This is my betrayer, guys," and they probably all would have jumped on him. But Jesus didn't do that. Jesus saw Judas's need, not his deed. That's exactly how he sees us. We sin against him every single day, but he sees our need. He doesn't hold that against us. But Jesus commanded his disciples, including us, to love our enemies. That's exactly what he did. He loved his enemies. Father, forgive them. They don't know not what they're doing. In the minutes before he died, he prayed for those who were crucified. That's love. So we are also to love our enemies, and I want you to remember something. That behind every wrongful act that you do, behind that any of us do, and behind every wrongful act that is done to us, is a need, is in someone's life, and we need to learn to have compassion. I can't give you names, but for the first several years that I went to camp, we had a pair of twins. And remember, these are all kids that have been removed from their home because of abuse and neglect. So these are all children from hard places. And they were just little bitty boys at the time, and they were a handful. And I understand that. I've got twin nephews. Whew, they get into all kinds of trouble that normal people don't get into, especially the boys. I don't know about the two of you. Were you that way too?
Yeah.
And they've got this symbionts. They've got this thing like they just know, and I can't even begin to tell you how many times those twins did something crazy. And so these two kids at camp were just a handful. But I loved them. And they were the ones that helped me realize that behind every sad story is a sad story. And I found that out. I realized that when I found out that they were arrested for sexual assault. They ended up going.
As children?
They were not yet 18,
Oh.
so they went to juvenile jail. But I love them, and I still love them. That's when I learned that hurt people hurt. It's obviously it's their fault. I'm not absolving them of what they did. I'm just saying that we can have compassion, even on those who hurt us. We can have compassion. I think I've told you that my favorite parenting book was called Shepherding a Child's Heart by Ted Sherman. And it said this in that book, and this helped me a lot. No action comes forth uncaused. We tend to deal with the action. Like you stole her toy. What does your mom say?
Give it back.
Yeah, she had it first. Give it back. That's not the problem. And in fact, you've got two sinful people because you stole it, right? And you're yanking on it to get it back, right? And there's something in the heart that causes us to do that. And if we don't get to the heart issue, and around here we say all the time, everything's a heart issue. Not doing your homework is a heart issue. Not treating people well is a heart issue. Everything is a heart issue. And if you don't get to that heart issue, you never solve the problem. Whatever that heart issue is, whether it's selfishness or rebellion or whatever it is, you have to get to the heart. And Jesus did not rebuke you. He didn't say, "Why are you doing this?" Now, he didn't need to say, "Why are you doing this?" But he didn't castigate him in any way. He had mercy on him. He had compassion on him. He even honored him he even honored him by giving him the sop, giving him the stuff dipped in the sop. That was to go to an honored guest.
Oh,
So that's why they wouldn't have understood what was really going on. So Jesus is challenging his disciples to demonstrate that same kind of compassion, that same kind of love toward others. And he's calling us to that too. So I'm going to give you just a little piece of advice. It's a piece of advice that really helped me when someone told me this. That if you have a difficult relationship in your life, if there is someone in your life that you have trouble loving, and you know that God calls you to love that person, no matter who that person is, pray for that. Because it's hard to feel an animosity towards someone for whom you are praying. So pray for that person. And you'll see your attitude toward that person. Now, you're going to have to pray more than once. Because you're going to get irritated and you're going to go, I got to. And then you'll have compassion again, and you probably have to do it again, and you'll probably have to do it again. But pray for them. Now, let's talk a little bit about the disciples. So he honors Jesus by giving him the sign. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him at once. Little children, yet a little while I am with you. You will seek me, and just as I said to the Jews, so now I also say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, where are you going?" Jesus answered him, "Where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow afterward." I love picturing this. Peter said to him, "Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you." Jesus answered, "Will you lay your life down for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow until you have denied me 3 times. I love picturing this. Jesus begins talking about love. The first thing he says is, "I'm leaving, and you can't come with me." And I picture Peter going, "Was he? I've gone with him everywhere. I'm gonna go. I can't." And he never hears the love one another as I have. He doesn't hear any of it. And finally, he just blurts out, "Why can't I go with you?" That's why there's that space in between him saying that and Peter blurting out. So we're going to talk a little bit about Peter's rash statements. He's good at that, isn't he? His first one was, "Never wash my feet. You will never wash my feet." He's trying to tell God what to do. You ever tried that? I have before. Usually it centers around the fact that I am not having fun. I have said this to God more than once because I have fun is a very high priority for me, frankly, too high of a priority. And I'll say, I'm not having fun here. Do you see that I'm not having any fun? And God is my private cruise director to make sure that I have fun all the time. And sometimes we are that way. We try to tell God what he needs to do. And that's not an attitude of humility. But I think that he was shocked again. Nothing like this had ever happened before. So I think he was shocked. I don't think that is a lack of humility in this case. It can be. And then he said, not only my feet, not only my feet. Give me a whole bath. Wash everything. So Peter went from one extreme to another. He asked Jesus to do more than God intended, which is characteristic of Peter. He was feeling and emotion than discernment, and that's why I identify. He had plenty of zeal. That can be a good thing, usually. And then he says, "I'll go with you. I'll lay down my life for you." We often say one thing and then do another job. That was the case with Peter. We're a lot like him, I think, in the fact that we profess more faith than we actually live. And Peter didn't realize how hard it was going to be. And then we see the disciples' insecurity. The disciples looked at one another, uncertain of whom he spoke. I don't know if this is about uncertainty, insecurity. They didn't know it was Judas. Jesus didn't tell them. But they all doubted their strength to stand for Christ. Someone's going to betray you. Is it not? Is it not? Is it not? You would hope that you would know, I won't do it. But they didn't. What?
You ever see that video? It's like a video and it's the disciples all together with Jesus, and one of them's like, Jesus is like, one of you's gonna betray me. Peter's like, is it me, Jesus? He's like, no, Peter. And then John's like, is it me, Jesus? He goes, no, John. And then Judas goes, is it me, Jesus? And then Jesus goes, is it me, Jesus?
Yeah, so they were insecure in that way. I don't think it's that important, but our love for Christ is important, and I think it's helpful to consider: am I willing to do whatever Jesus says? Do I love him so much that I will go with him? Yes.
Do you think Judas knew that he was going to betray Jesus, or do you think that was just on the spot?
100%. He'd already made the deal. Yeah.
So
He'd already made the deal.
Okay.
And then the disciples' ignorance. Again, a harsh word. They just didn't get it. There's a lot I could say here, and the questions that they asked, but they just didn't get it, and they couldn't get it. I'm not going to be too hard on Peter and the other disciples because they had no framework to understand a dying Messiah. They didn't read that. They didn't read the Old Testament scriptures that way. So there's no way for them to understand that. They thought that Jesus was going to restore the kingdom of Israel right away. So why would he leave them? That didn't make any sense. Why could they not go with him? They've been with him for 3 years. What do you mean we can't go with him? It was very troubling to them. And they just didn't understand. And I don't think they had a framework that they could. It's like if you put me in the calculus room. I'd be like, I watched the John Baylor math part, and I go, no, I can't, because it hurts my brain, and I don't understand it. And I don't think they could understand. And I don't think they were meant to understand. And then again, this is a little bit harsh.
Oh my gosh.
Complete failure. But it is true that all the disciples, they all proclaimed that they loved him that night. Hang on, because you're going to have to get you're also going to have to get your quiz to do. That will be your homework. So you don't have to do it. They all proclaimed to love him, but what did all but one do? Desert.
She said ran away.
Just deserted him. Judas already has, and the 10 of the others deserted. And so, in that sense, yes, only John was at the foot of the cross. But rather than pointing the finger at them, I'd like us to point fingers at ourselves. Am I willing to follow Jesus? Are you willing to follow Jesus no matter the cost? If we aren't willing to do that, then we need to examine ourselves, not just others. That's it for that. I'll give you your quizzes, and that will be your homework.